are Cheonggyeong palaces. There will be a quiz. So naturally, in between the palaces, this is where the aristocrats, the Yangban, used to live. And if you know much about Korean history, you know, transitions of power rarely went smoothly. So this area saw a lot of action. All right. Try to get dry. Try to stay dry as much as you can. All right. There we go. So like I mentioned, down over in this direction is Cheonggyeong Palace. It's a little far for us to walk tonight. I tried. But in the 1700s, the king had a little problem with his son, Prince Sado. Sado had a habit of raping and murdering the palace servants. But being of royal blood, he couldn't be executed like a common criminal. So the king came up with a bit of a loophole. On the grounds of the palace, out of the public eye, he secretly locked his son in a rice chest, where he died after 8 days of dehydration. Interesting enough, Sado's son ended up becoming King Jongjo, who's considered one of the greatest kings in Korean history. Did wonderful things for the peasants, built Pasong Fortress down over in Suwon. In fact, if you go visit the fortress, they have a replica of the rice chest, so you can take a picture of yourself inside it. There's another camp of historians that claim Sado wasn't crazy at all. His father was. Crazy enough to lock his son in a rice chest. But you'll find the winners write the history. Now, a couple of centuries before that, in the 1500s, there was a 12-year-old king on the throne, King Janjong. Unfortunately, he had a very ambitious uncle, Prince Suyang. And one evening, Suyang and his men camped out right here in these alleys. And as Janjong and his entourage were coming through, Suyang and his men jumped out and ambushed them. So many people were killed, they couldn't count all the bodies. And after a few days, the smell got to be so bad, they burned this area to the ground to get rid of the stench and to purify the land. And after that, these alleys were called Jaegul, the alleys of ashes. And today, officially, this is Jaedong, the neighborhood of ashes. Unfortunate name for a pizza place. Unfortunate name for a pizza place. It's also important to pizza place. Alright, so for much of this evening, we're going to talk a lot about the fall of the Joseon Dynasty and the rise of the Japanese Empire around 1850 to 1910. Politically a very tumultuous time in Korea, kind of like Game of Thrones in Asia. During this period, there were lots of riots. And usually when there was a riot, this is the area people would riot in because this is where all the rich people lived. One example was the Gapshin Revolt of the 1880s. Supposedly, this is started by a pro-Japanese faction. They wanted to overthrow the monarchy and modernize Korea, similar to the Meiji Restoration in Japan. But Queen Min heard about this plot, and she got Chinese troops stationed down in Itaewon. And after 3 days of bloody fighting here, they quelled the uprising. A year after that, that's when Westerners were first allowed inside the Hermit Kingdom. And the first group were a bunch of missionaries and diplomats. And they came up, they introduced themselves to King Gojong, and he said, well, hello, nice to meet you, but please be patient while we find you some proper housing. And some of his advisors said, well, sire, we do have these newly empty houses out here. Because everyone was killed. And the king said, no, the foreigners, they'd be offended by all the ghosts. But this is actually in one of the missionaries' journals. He wrote that when they discovered how cheap the houses in this area were going for, they said, oh, no problem, we'll take them. So, here, I'll bring this down. The house that used to be right over there belonged to a general. He and his whole family were murdered in the Gapshin Revolt. And it was taken over by an American missionary doctor named Horace N. Allen. And he converted it into Korea's first Western hospital, which later became Severance Hospital, which we still have today. And he wrote in his journals how they had to scrub down some of the rooms because of all the blood and gore. And today, this is the Constitutional Court of Korea. It figures into modern history because that's where we impeach our presidents. And it figures into dark side of Seoul history because when we impeached our president in 2017, it's one of the few times we canceled the tour because 4 protesters were killed at our meeting spot.
Oh shit.
Yeah, safety first. Now down over here is the famous Bukchon neighborhood with all the old Hanok houses. So you would think old neighborhood, haunted houses. There are a few. There's one house where men with weak hearts die of heart attacks as they pass through the gates. There's one house where families get into arguments as they walk by it. And there's one house where pretty much every single owner has committed suicide. Now the source I have for this is a person I knew who lived in Bukchon for over 30 years. And when he told me this, I said, great, which houses are they? I want to take my tours there. And he said, yeah, well, my neighbors don't want you here. So we're gonna go back this way. So when the Japanese started taking over, they did a little bit of psychological warfare. For one thing, part of Cheonggyeong Palace was Jeongmyo's Shrine. Jeongmyo's Shrine is where they keep the royal ancestral tablets. Once a year, the royal family went to the shrine to pay tribute to their ancestors. Very important in a Confucian society. So one of the first things the Japanese did was they built this road. And in building this road, they built it between the palace and the shrine. So they symbolically cut the royal family off from their ancestors. They did a few other things as well. They built the Governor General's building in front of the throne room, hiding it. And they went to the trouble of shifting the gate of Gyeongbokgung Palace a few meters to the east to kill the feng shui, feng shui. It wasn't until 2010 we moved it back. Alright, so because of all those riots I told you about, they started a curfew for men at sundown. This is the 1890s. So right when the sun was setting, the big bell would ring. All men had to be indoors. The only exceptions were foreigners, government officials on business, and blind men. So since most men were indoors at night, many women use this as an opportunity to get their errands done. Since they were doing it at night, many also complained about being bothered by ghosts, particularly Japanese ghosts. So to protect themselves, some women carried little bags of gochugaru, chili powder, with them to throw at the ghost. I guess Japanese ghosts don't like spicy food. So to protect you tonight, there you go.
Pepper powder, gochu powder, pepper powder, Jackson Congo.
It's a minor palace. The most famous resident here was Sungsun Daewon-gun, who was King Gojong's father, the last king of Korea. And he was regent until young Gojong came of age, because Gojong himself was adopted by the previous king because he had no sons. So his biological father, Daewon-gun, ruled Korea as regent around the 1860s, 1870s. He's also one of the greater assholes of the late Joseon dynasty. Quite the conservative man, he did not want Korea to modernize, and he shut it off from the rest of the world. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? His immigration policy was, if you see a foreigner on the beach, kill him on sight.
Oh, wow.
People are particularly threatened by this new foreign menace called Christianity. Quite the perverse philosophy. For example, in Judeo-Christianity, the fourth commandment is to honor your father and your mother. Why is that not the first? Peace in society. So in the 1860s, the Daewon-gun rounded up 3,000 Catholics, put them up on a hill on the north side of the Han River, and decapitated them all. So many heads rolled, the Han River turned red. After that, the hill was called Jeoldusan, Headless Mountain. And today is where the foreigner cemetery is. In fact, we go visit the cemetery. They have shrines to the martyrs there, and they even have one of the chopping blocks used in the executions with the blood stain still on it. In 1921, while Korea was a Japanese colony, there was a restaurant in this area that was popular with Japanese officials and Korean collaborators, traders. A little problem with this restaurant was that when patrons looked up, their faces got splattered with blood. A little bit of a problem. So the police were called in to investigate, and their investigation concluded it was true. When people looked up, their faces got splattered with blood, but they never figured out where the blood was coming from. So soon after the police report, the restaurant went out of business, and the owner went mad, wandered the streets until she died. And people say that was the revenge of Korean ghosts. This building right here, this is Nagwon Arcade. It has sort of a funny history. In the 1970s, the Seoul government wanted to widen this road, but there was a traditional market here, and the shopkeepers didn't want to give it up. So they came up with a few underhanded, slightly illegal schemes. For one thing, they made a deal with the city to build this building over the road and to build it higher than the local building codes allowed at the time. They got permission to make it 8 stories high. As you can see, the contractor was a little bit overboard. After it was finished, the shopkeepers moved into the basement, creating Korea's first underground market. The other kind of shady thing that the shopkeepers did was they tried to make this a ghost building, as in they discouraged tenants from moving in. They wanted to keep it an empty shell, like a giant middle finger to the Seoul government. But during the 80s, people noticed that this underpass had pretty good picnics. So musicians started hanging out here and playing. As a side effect of that, a vibrant club district sprouted in this area, including the beginnings of a gay and lesbian club scene. So we're into that here today. As a side effect of that, musical instrument dealers started moving into this building. And now it's the largest musical instrument market in the entire world. The coolest jacket in Korea. After the Korean War, this area was the largest and most popular red light district in Seoul. So popular, in fact, that there was a slang term at the time, 정sam하자, which loosely translated to go drinking and whoring. One account I read estimated that the majority of young Seoul men lost their virginity in this area during that period. Unfortunately, some men had a little more violent appetites, and a good many ladies came to grisly ends. And their ghosts now lurk the alleyways seeking to exact revenge upon men. Now, in 1968, the mayor of Seoul was checking the progress of a shopping complex being built on the edge of this area when he was approached by a lady of the evening. And he was so shocked that he convened an emergency city meeting to do something about this. And they came up with Operation Butterfly. As in, you get rid of the butterflies, you get rid of the flowers. So what they did was at each entrance to this neighborhood, they set up these high-beam spotlights. And hiding in the shadows were plainclothes police officers and members of the media. And anytime a man tried to walk through this light barrier, they jump out and go, "Oh, excuse me, sir, what do you plan to do here tonight? Can we take your picture?" Click, click, click. They planned on doing the sting operation for a month, but within only 1 week, all the adult businesses in this area packed up and moved to the American military bases. By the way, I should mention that over the years, we've had quite a few clairvoyants join us. Many have told me that there's a little girl that follows us for the first half of the tour. And others have said that there's a woman standing at the entrance to this alley.
Oh, no.
Yeah, I was going to say,
I agree.
they kind of say there's remnants of the old red light district with the remaining love motels, signified by the privacy curtains. Here, follow me. Up until a few years ago, adultery was a criminal offense. You could go to prison for cheating on your spouse. But a few years ago, the Constitutional Court struck down the adultery law. And I noticed soon after they struck down the adultery law, this hotel invested in new privacy curtains. Okay, this is Top Gold Park, named after the pagoda right there behind the glass. Remember Prince Sooyoung in the Alley of Ashes? He succeeded, became King Sejong, and he built that. Now the glass in the park came much later. In fact, this used to be a Buddhist temple complex. During those times, Korea's most notorious ruler, Prince Yonsan-gun, converted the temple into his personal pleasure palace. So people claim a lot of Seoul's sexual energy is focused here. Now the park itself was built in the 1890s. It was designed by an Irish architect, and it was the first modern style park in Korea. It's also the birthplace of the March 1st independence movement in 1919. But for our purposes, it's also a popular hangout spot for opium addicts, and also where jilted lovers went to commit suicide, and their ghosts still linger around here. And these days, if you're here late enough at night, it's a popular meeting spot for old men looking to hook up with other old men. Oh, also, has anyone watched Squid Game Season 2 yet?
Yes.
All right, famous scene in episode 1 happened right over there. Check it out. So naturally, the main road between the palaces was heavily traveled by aristocrats on their horses. And if an aristocrat's going by on his horse, and you're not an aristocrat, you have to drop everything and get down on the ground until he passes by. Very inconvenient for people who lived and worked in this area. So normal people use these side roads, peanut road, the alley to avoid the horses. And these lasted all throughout Seoul's history. And after the war, they were known for their grilled mackerel and makgeolli rice beer puffs. And they played a small role in the 1987 democracy movement. At the time, people were protesting down over Gwanghwamun Plaza, and the police were tear gassing them, chasing them down, arresting them, sometimes torturing, sometimes killing them. By the way, those of you who booked, check your messages. I'm going to send you a map of everything I talked about tonight. I've even tracked down some of dictator Chung Do-won's portrait painters.
Oh wow.
So some of the protesters evaded the police by running down Pimakul, and the owners of the grilled mackerel pubs hid the protesters in their charcoal bins. Unfortunately, around when the pandemic started, they tore down what was left of Pimakul. As a government official told some friends of mine, "Why do you foreigners care so much about old buildings?" Jungno Tower. There's a reason it's shaped that way. The ground it's built on is cursed. Before that was there, almost anything on that land has had horrible disasters happen. So they built the building with a hole in the middle, so the bad luck would have a way to escape. To help support that theory, in 2013, the buildings around it burned to the ground. Well, this was left untouched. From 1910 to 1945. During that period, one of the few ways Koreans could get ahead in the world was to live in Japan. And Koreans who live in Japan are called zainichi. In the 1920s, a young zainichi man named Hayashi graduated university and went into the Japanese construction industry. Now, at the time, the construction industry was controlled by the Yakuza. So young Hayashi joined the Yakuza, and he moved up the ranks really fast. In the 1930s, they sent him over to Seoul to open their first Korean branch office in Myeongdong. Now, at the time, Korea also had their own gangs, but they weren't really organized. They were more like street thugs getting into rumbles in the street and a lot of West Side Story type of stuff. And they saw what Hayashi and the Yakuza were doing in Myeongdong, and they went, oh, we should copy this business model. So that was the birth of Korean organized crime. Now, Hayashi did very well for himself as Korea's first godfather, but by the 1940s, he retired from the Yakuza, stayed in Korea, and went back into the construction industry, where he was very successful. He was so successful that in 1974, the Korean government gave him an award for constructing Korea's first subway station. This is built by Korea's first godfather. Pointing out that a few years ago, we did a little Kickstarter right at the beginning of the pandemic to produce some horror comic books based on Korean folklore. We did it twice, so we did it for 2 volumes. The second time we were put on Kickstarter's front page as their featured project. So I brought some of them with me. If you want to, I'll give you the sample so you can take a look at it. Oh, there it is.
Buy one. I'm gonna buy one.
Here we go. So if you want to check it out, if you it is at the end of the tour or something, it's 15,000 won. Also, I have these hats for 25, and I also have hang on right here.
You guys wanna check it out?
Dark Side of Soul pins. These are 5,000.
5,000. I'm gonna get a book too.
Tell me if you want any, and I'll set it up for you. They avoided this area because of all the headless ghosts, because we're near the central execution grounds. It's a section of the Berlin Wall. What's doing here, Joe? Well, glad you asked me. It's a gift from Berlin to one of the last divided countries on Earth as a symbol of hope. Yeah. The other side will look more familiar to you. So the bear and the lamppost are also from Berlin. And if you were in Berlin, this side would be facing west. But since we're in Korea, this side is facing
North. South.
south. You have four channels. What's funny is most Koreans don't know this is here. And recently they installed this thing. I guess they didn't get the irony of putting a barrier around a barrier. Cool some mornings to discover a dead girl's body floating down here. One of the reasons being that if a family was suffering from bad luck, blame the girl. Yeah, they also boil people alive around here too. Now, when they did revive the stream, they held an opening ceremony, but during that ceremony, a woman fell off this bridge and died. So now we have a barrier here. I guess this is the only bridge you can fall off of. The reason I'm taking you out here is a lot of stories take place near water, particularly the Han River. But we're not going to walk to the Han River. We're going to use our imaginations. In 1961, on the eastern side of Seoul, near what is now Gwangnam Station, a teenager confessed his love to his cousin. Ew.
Incest.
She rejected him and he got angry and he shoved her. And she smashed her head up against the rocks and died. And people say these days at Gwangnam Station, you can see her ghost in the driver's cab of the subway train as it passes through. There's also an urban legend she appears in the background of a K-pop video that was filmed there.
What?
All right. Oh boy. Do you remember Prince Sato who got locked in the rice chest?
Yeah.
Well, it's like I said, his son King Jongjo felt that his father was wrongfully killed, so he spent much of his life trying to appease his father's spirit, and it culminated on Sato's 50th birthday, where Jongjo led this epic, legendary parade that went from the palace to his father's grave down in Suwon. And this mural depicts that parade. See how long it is. Financial district and also the location of the National Assembly building. A little over 10 years ago, some people at the National Assembly complained that they were being accosted by ghosts. So some people did an investigation and discovered the National Assembly likely was built on top of the graves of the palace servants. And the palace servants were all women who were not allowed to marry. Now I'm guessing some of the politicians must have been quite powerful, for they were able to procure hundreds of thousands of dollars in taxpayer money to come up with a very male solution to this problem. On the grounds of Yoido Park, they erected a giant stone penis to appease the ghosts. Soon after erecting the penis, Christian groups complained and they had to take it down. But that's not the only example of male solutions to problems in Korean history. In 1592, there were the Hideyoshi invasions from Japan. And there's a village on the east coast that's famous because all the virgins of the village leapt from the cliffs into the sea rather than be deflowered by the Japanese invaders. Years later, fishermen complained they weren't catching any fish. So the village elders got together to figure out what was going on. And they concluded, it must be the angry ghosts of those virgins. So they came up with a very male solution to this problem. One evening, all the men of the village got together, walked out to the water, lined up along the edge, pulled down their trousers, and jerked off into the sea. Because you know that's what virgin ghosts really want. The giant Kakake Fest. The fish came back. With two peckers. Its father, the king, searched his kingdom far and wide to find an appropriate princess for him with two hoo-has. Couldn't find one. So the prince grew up, became an adult, grew old, and died a bitter, frustrated virgin. So Korean folklore says that when you get a cold and you can't breathe through your nose, because the prince is having a little fun with your nostrils. That is until your nose starts running. Back then, the king had two queens. A queen from Jeonju, the Jeonju queen, and a queen from Seoul, Seoul queen. And Shindok was the Seoul queen. And she and the king were very much in love with each other. Who didn't like her so much were the sons from the Jeonju queen, mostly because Shindok was promoting her own sons to be ahead of them to be in line for the throne. Unfortunately, Shindok came down with a mysterious illness and died. And the king was so brokenhearted, he built an elaborate tomb for her. And then he traveled his kingdom in mourning. While the king was out of the capital, the prime minister has to plot with Shindok's sons to murder the sons from the Jeonju queen. The fifth son from the Jeonju queen heard about this, convinced his brothers to do a preemptive strike, and they went and murdered all of Shindok's sons. Game of Thrones in Asia. When the king returned, he was so shocked, he was so horrified, he abdicated the throne, and it fell into the lap of the oldest son from the Jeonju queen. But the fifth son, who he could figure out was the ambitious one of the bunch, convinced his brother to let him have the throne, which he did. During his reign, a flood came down the Cheonggyecheon stream, washing out one of the bridges. This guy hated Queen Shindok so much, he dismantled her tomb, and he used the stones, some of them upside down, to rebuild the bridge so people could always walk on top of the bridge. This is it right here. And that concludes the regular edition of Dark Side of Song. I guess I'm going to show you that. All right, do you notice anything?
It's stained.
Well, could be. It's upside down. You see, there's the head.
Okay, upside down.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's upside down.
Yeah. People coming by this place all the time. They have no idea what this bridge really is. Even though there's a plaque upstairs that tells you the same story I just told you, except on that plaque, Shindok is demoted to concubine.
Oh.
The winners write the history. Unfortunately, we're going to say goodbye to some of you tonight.
Yes.
Would you be up for a bonus story? All right. All right. One summer. Oh, am I using? All right. One summer, a group of university students went mountain hiking. Halfway up the mountain, they came across this enclosed shelter. Sometimes shaman, mudam, they build these shelters on the sides of mountains. And this one girl goes, I'm really tired. I can't make it to the top. How about I just stay here? The rest of you go to the top, and when you come down, get me, and I'll come down with you. And her friends go, okay, that sounds fair enough. And her boyfriend says, are you sure you're gonna be okay? I can stay here with you. She says, no, don't worry about me. Go with everyone else. So they leave her behind. After a while, one of those famous summer rainstorms starts. So she goes inside the shelter and closes the door. 6 o'clock comes around. Her friends haven't returned. 7 o'clock. 8 o'clock, sun starts going down. 9 o'clock. Boom, 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 boom. There's a bang on the door. She opens it, and her friends come in out of the rain. As she's closing the door, she realizes her boyfriend's not with them. She goes, guys, where's my boyfriend? And her friends go, we're really sorry. We're almost to the top of the mountain when the rainstorm started. Suddenly there was a landslide. He fell off the mountain and was killed. We need to stay here until the sun comes up so we can go to the police and get them to retrieve his body. Well, naturally the girl broke down in tears. And while her friends were consoling her, she looks up. The boyfriend's face is in the window. And the boyfriend is beckoning to her like this. Now in Korea, it's believed that if a ghost beckons to you, you do not follow or you will instantly die. Well, the girl, she gets up and she starts walking towards the door. And her friends go, what are you doing? Are you crazy? You know what's going to happen. And she says, I don't care. I love him so much, I have to say goodbye. So she goes, reaches for the door, opens it, hand grabs her, pulls her outside. Suddenly she's running down the mountain with the boyfriend's hand gripped tightly around her wrist. They're almost to the bottom when she trips over this root and falls down. The boyfriend goes to pick her up, just slaps his hand out of the way. Stay away from me, what's happening? Boyfriend says, we were almost to the top of the mountain when the rainstorm started. Suddenly there was a landslide. All of our friends were killed. I'm the only survivor. I get so